talking about how I felt that, in my opinion, a lot has been talked about race in terms of how the system in the United States is designed to keep black people down, and how things are existing to kind of make it difficult for black people to move up in the social ladder. But that said, I'm gonna take this as a given. So my question now is, what can be done to us to achieve equality? What can be done for us to remove this obstacle that's been in black people's path? Now, we can argue here about whether it is or is not. You know what I'm saying? Like whether there is, because I know that we can debate on that. But just to open up the topic, I want to look at methods for equality, how to achieve this equality in the United States, and I want to know what people kind of think about that.
Well, first of all, and this is not to be funny, if you want to try to achieve this equality and you try to remove this obstacle, then you have to rewrite the whole book, and that's impossible, because our Constitution was written not to include people of color or women. It was written for white men, and that's the dominant society. The testosterone dominates the United States of America. Period. You know what I mean? And there's no obstacle that can be removed. And I had a college professor that said, if you think about it, if you stop thinking about it like the system is holding the black person down, it's keeping the black person down. If you look at it in a different sense and say, the system is doing what it was created to do. If you put it in perspective, if you think it from a white male's perspective, the system is working exactly like how it's supposed to work.
Maybe I will disagree with that. Why? Because I think it's a system which was designed, maybe the American system, the Constitution, for people to achieve certain end, liberty, freedom, and maybe not for everybody, but for a group of people. And then I think that as long as you start talking about liberty, freedom, equality of chances, even if it's for a privileged group, I think anybody can relate to that. All men are created equal. Even if you're only referring to white people at that time, I think today you can use that concept and apply it to everybody. And as an example, I think when people are fighting against colonialism, people use, for example, in Niger or in French colonies, when people are fighting against French colonialism, people use the French Declaration on that human right as an example to say, you say this, why aren't you in a way conforming to what you already say? I think a system maybe just designed for few people, but I think when you open your eyes or when you look at it, you can apply to everybody.
But that's maybe one good thing I always say about the U.S. Constitution, which is why I do think the U.S. Constitution is a brilliant piece of work, because it does allow for amendments to the Constitution. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, one abolishing slavery, next one confirming that if you're born in the U.S., you're an American citizen, and 15 acknowledging rights of everybody, all Americans, you know what I'm saying? So there are systems in place to try to balance it out, because what's one thing you can say, as racist as the the founding fathers were, they did have the vision to say, well, 100 years from now, things could be different.
It's a very progressive.
It's very progressive. It's very progressive. But I guess the point that I was simply trying to make is that I think we're looking too much of it as a race problem. And by looking at it only as a race problem, we're not looking, as you just said, gender, economic status. I don't care what you want to say. If I'm the CEO of Microsoft and I'm black, I will experience my racism, but because I'm the CEO of Microsoft and I own hundreds of billions of dollars worth of assets, there's not much you can do to me. I can do really whatever I want, and it will get done. If you're the janitor in the Microsoft office, I'm sorry, like, you're not going to have that kind of right. So I'm simply saying that I think one of the ways to get equality in society is to get into positions of power in society.
I still support the thing where it says, what Neil was saying about how the Constitution was basically made for the white man. And that's the system which was in place. If you look back in history when the actions against slavery, like John C. Cowan, that guy who was like supporting slavery, he used the Constitution to say it has to protect property owners, saying, the minority, he used the minority, and the minority was referring to the property owners. People who were owning slaves, they're the minority. He turned it around, to interpret the way it was. And of course, it was true. In the sense, slaves were property for them. And so the Constitution supported that system, they amended the Constitution, yes.
And the Civil War was fought.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Civil War was fought. But still, you know, those Jeffersons and whatever, what they said is like, black people can be free, but they'll never be equal as white men, or not on an equal basis. They can never. You know, but those are the architects and the founders and the supporters of the whole, you know, American society. So if they say that, what about these following generations? I mean, how do they interpret it?
Yeah.
You know.
But at the same time, I think we should also, in a way, look at maybe the institutions here, the institutions, the legal institutions in the United States in a maybe more futuristic way. Imagine a country which practiced slavery in the past and then was able to move from that hardcore slavery to where the president of the country is a black man. I think it's like, really when you look at the United States, I think it's the most progressive society. Like, look at the country's past and just see how the country just moves so quickly and detach itself from the past. It's like, what United States has done, I don't think there's any other country in the world which can do that. It's really a country. When people really refer to the country as the land of freedom and opportunity, I think that really reflects a lot of reality. It's a country where anybody can come, and make something out of nothing.
And that's the
And that in itself is really, I mean, it's great. It's very progressive. It's a country in a way which does not focus on only one ideology, but the ideology of freedom or liberty. And I think that's maybe the power of it. That's why, I mean, United States is the only country that can be multicultural in that sense. Because there's no, like, if being white doesn't mean, America is not white, America is not black, America is not yellow, America is multicultural, it's multiracial, like that. So I think maybe we should look at the country in that sense and the institutions of the country in that sense, as Toivo was saying, which allow amendments or maybe progressive
I
changes.
agree with that. When you talk about, for example,
I think Neil has something to say.
yeah, I just quickly just put in this point, which you jump to Neil, but I think that the one thing I'll say is that, like, you said come to America. I mean, black people were taken. They were brought to America, so they didn't have that kind of choice. So people who are coming to America, one thing another professor of ours has said was that people came to America from a worse situation. They were like, it's bad where I'm at. You know what I'm saying? So I don't have any problem living in the U.S. where things would be a little better, and I have the chance, as you did say, to go higher. Black people were taken, and then they're brought to this foreign land. They have no idea where they are. So their history is always going to be different from anybody else's who's come to the United States. That's one thing that needs to be taken into consideration. And then again, you talk about the progression. You talk about how we've moved forward. I mean, how do you? It's a difficult problem to quantify how much we've moved forward, because indeed we've moved forward. But then why are the inner city schools still as bad as they are, where they're predominantly blacks and Hispanics? Why is that the case? Number one. Why is it also the case that blacks and Hispanics basically make up roughly a quarter of the population in the U.S., a little bit more, but yet control so little of the assets in the United States? You see what I'm saying? So now, yes, indeed, Barack Obama has ascended. You can talk about Colin Powell, you can talk about Benjamin O. Davis, you can talk about many different figures who have now risen in U.S. society. But then again, is this where we should be? Is a non-philosophical question. You know what I'm saying? Like, how much should we have progressed? Where is it fast enough? What have we been doing along the way? And I'm saying that it's not moving fast enough. And I think the way to be moving fast enough is for us to shed, as black people, to shed this whole race thing, same thing back home, to shed that idea of, oh my God, you know, it's colonialism, that's putting me down. And this is where the responsibility has to now start kicking in. I think black people need to start doing that. You know, listen, indeed the system is bad, but what can we do to get our young men off the streets? Why, you know, what can we do to get them off the streets? What can we get them out of prison? Because still to this day, there are more black men in prison than are in college. That's a scary statistic. You know what I'm saying? And you can say whatever you want to say. Some people say, well, black people, they're just violent. So you can dismiss it, they're just violent, or you can now look at their biographies and see where they're coming from, say, now what forces are conspiring to make it so. And so my thing is, I see the forces. My question simply is, how do you break those forces?